Hello, gay men, and welcome back to another episode of Coming Inside Out, where we explore what happens after coming out, especially for men coming out later in life. Hey, Mark, how are you?
Hey, Brian, I am doing great today. We've had a little bit of a hiatus, I think, because
Yes.
life has been busy and we're here in the middle of Pride Month. So it's been lots of prideful things to do, right? But great to see you. Happy Pride.
Yes. And happy Mental Health Awareness Month for men.
Absolutely. Yes,
And
indeed.
happy Father's Day, Mark. It's right around the corner.
It's yes, and to you as well. It is coming up indeed. Yeah. Yeah. I know
Thank you.
Father's Day can sometimes look differently for many guys that are in situations where their lives are looking a little bit different than they may have in the past, right? So it's one of those things that I think for um, many can be a little mixed.
Absolutely. Well, hey, let's jump into Pride really quickly. I
Yeah.
know that we both did some celebration a couple weeks ago. I went to the LA WeHo Pride. You were at your Pride.
Yeah, it's been really nice month of Pride things so far, right? We had our local Pride here where I live, but we still got our big New York City Pride coming up at the end of the month, and looking forward to that. Last night I had a really exciting, fun experience. This is the first time they've done this. The New York Philharmonic Orchestra did a special Pride concert. It was absolutely wonderful, highlighting a lot of composers, composers from the LGBTQ community, LGBTQ artists. They had a couple of Broadway artists that came and sang, and the New York City Gay Men's Chorus. Just, it was such a joyful celebration.
Mm.
And I went with a friend of mine, and we were both just commenting on how wonderful it was to be in that environment. And I would guess probably 98% of the audience was part of the queer community,
Mm.
and just as was everybody on the stage, and just coming together to celebrate the music. It was really special.
Wow. And the collective energy, I'm sure
Yeah.
you could feel it when you're
Yeah.
at something like that. Yes. Oh, very nice.
Absolutely. And
Hey,
yeah,
I
yeah.
want to pivot for a second because I put this down and I forgot to bring it up. We posted a very short video, I think it's 8 minutes, of you a couple weeks ago in your
Yes.
hometown giving an amazing speech. I don't know if you had a chance to read a bunch of what the listeners wrote in and said, but Mark, tell us a little bit about that event.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, again, another, I'd say, really highlight of Pride Month so far for me was I was asked to come and speak at the Pride flag raising in the town where I lived for over 20 years, where I raised my kids, and where I don't live there anymore, but no, I don't live far from there, only about 20 minutes away. And they asked me to come and speak. And it was really very moving in the
Yes.
sense that going back there and just the support from the community, from people that I've known for so long, um, and I said this in my remarks, that 3 years ago I never could have imagined that I would have been up there at the podium as a gay man talking about the importance of pride and why flag raisings like what they were doing there in the town of Bedford was so important. It was yeah, it was really highlight, and it was very moving for me to be there
Yes.
and to be a part of that. Yeah.
It was a moving
Yeah.
speech.
Well, thank you.
Yes. Mm.
Thank you. It was, yeah, it felt so affirming. That's, that's I've been finding that the events and the things that I've been involved with this year, it's been about that affirmation of really, I find for myself, and I'd love to hear how your experiences have been, Brian, so far in Pride. Um, this year for me different than I think in some other years, and that it's felt very affirming, and that I really feel much more a part of this community now.
Yes, I
And
totally get that.
yeah, how about you? How was WeHo Pride?
I am more of a spectator these days. I came out during COVID, so there wasn't a Pride celebration, there weren't parades. So my first real Pride experience was almost 3 years after I came out in 2023. I marched in a pride parade with a group of gay fathers, and that was in Palm Springs 2023. And then in 2024, our group marched in the WeHope Pride. So this last year, I went as a spectator. I walked around, I watched the parade, I visited the vendors. I love the energy. It just, I don't feel like, the last couple of months, I haven't really felt like I've had much of
Yeah,
a voice. So
yeah, but
that's where I'm
that's
at.
okay
But
to talk
anyways,
about.
yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's different for everybody, right? As much as the experience has been, as I've talked about, affirming for me, there's been a lot of discussion, even coming from within the queer community. Does pride still matter? Has
Mhm.
been kind of a question that's come up in different forms. I think sometimes there's misperceptions that permeate. Uh, People see maybe some footage that's reported on by some conservative media that's showing, or purporting to claim that gay pride is just a perverted,
Mm.
you know, bacchanal, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, and that leads to some questions about what is it. And with so much of the pullback and everything else from the corporate world called into question, does pride still matter? And I talked about this in the remarks I gave at the flag raising, that it matters more than ever. And whether it is a celebration of how far we've come, or also a reminder of how far we still need to go, when we're seeing the attempts to pull back on LGBTQ rights, and particularly the trans part of the LGBTQ community.
Many of our listeners spent years, sometimes decades, building careers, raising families, and living lives that looked one way on the outside while privately wrestling with questions about identity and authenticity. But coming out isn't the end of the journey. In many ways, it's the beginning. Suddenly, there's a new question about dating, relationships, sexuality, community, and how to navigate space that may feel completely unfamiliar. Today, we are excited to explore those topics with someone who has spent much of his career helping people think differently about sexuality, shame, and self acceptance.
Joining us today is Zachary Zane. He is the author of Boyslut. He's a sex columnist, an LGBTQ advocate, and one of the most recognizable voices writing about modern sexuality and relationships. Many of you may be familiar with his book called Boyslut, a memoir and manifesto. He's also the co-author of Men's Health, Best Sex Ever. And he currently serves as Grindr's sex and relationship expert. He's also the editor-in-chief of Boyslut Zine, a Substack that features nonfiction and fiction erotica from Kinksters worldwide. And I can tell you some pretty hot stories if you don't follow his Substack. But he also does thought pieces on all things about sex and culture. His sex and relationship columns have appeared in Men's Health, Cosmopolitan, Bi.org, amongst others. His essays have been featured in the New York Times, Rolling Stone, the Washington Post, GQ, Playboy, and the list goes on. And lastly, he hosts the Bi Babes Book Club with Alstora, which spotlights memoirs and novels by bisexual authors or featuring bisexual protagonists, plus a monthly live Q&A with the author. You can follow Zach on Instagram at Zachary Zane _, and his Substack is zacharyzane.substack.com. And we're really pleased to welcome Zach to the podcast.
Yes.
Zach, welcome to Coming Inside Out. We are really thrilled to have you with us today. I think there's so many topics that you bring so much relevance to.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, before we jump in, to some of the specifics, though, just tell us a little bit about you, right? What should we know about you for those who aren't familiar with you and your story, and how did you kind of get to where you are today?
Sure. So, I mean, you read my bio, so you guys know kind of what I do now, but I can share a little bit about kind of how I became the sex expert and how I embraced my bisexuality, if that works for you guys.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think I was always confused. I think because I knew I liked women, but I also was attracted to men. And at the time, like when I was figuring this stuff out, or like when I was in college, I started college in 2009. And I purposely like went to school like on the other side of the country. I think I just wanted to get away from everyone. I didn't want anyone to know me. I just kind of wanted to start fresh. I ended up hooking up with this guy like 2 weeks into my freshman year. And I had to get so drunk. I like blacked out because I was just so nervous. And actually in the middle of blowing me, like I left to go vomit like twice. And the second time he came back, he's like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, are you like too drunk? I'm like, no, keep going. Like, this is important. I know this is important for me figuring out who I am. And I considered I might be bi. But at the time when I Googled like bisexual man, really the only articles that came out were like articles about like research articles about bi men having and spreading HIV. But there was nothing speaking to the identity of it. And, at that time, it was really before kind of in the past, I feel like 15 years, there's been this huge push for bisexual visibility. And this was kind of before that. So everyone you spoke to really thought gay or straight, you're greedy if you're bisexual. It doesn't exist. It's just a stepping stone on the way to gay town. And so I was like, I guess I'm straight because after I had the hookup, I wasn't like in love with him. And I was also so drunk, I didn't know. But I was like, no, I know I've been in love with women. I guess it was fine. It felt okay. Like a blowjob's a blowjob. But then I kept getting really drunk and hooking up with dudes. And so like all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I had the experimental moment. Yeah, I had this experimental moment and I thought that would be it. But then I kept doing it for years and years. And I would say, oh, I must be gay. But then I'd fall in love with a woman, so I must be straight. And it wasn't until after college where I ended up seeing this therapist who was like LGBT friendly. And I went on this whole rant about how I'm confused. I think I'm gay. I think I'm straight. And the second time I went there and I started this rant, he goes, Zach, I want to stop you. It seems like you're clearly bisexual. Is there something like I'm missing? And I said, oh, that shit doesn't exist in men. And he goes, Zach, you're too smart to think that, which I think was kind of like also a way to kind of do a little bit of an ego jab in that as well. But originally I thought I was only like sexually attracted to men and could never date a guy. And that was, again, I just had some shame. I was like, it was somehow more palatable. It's like, well, I'm just getting blown in locker rooms, whatever it is. I'm not actually bi. I don't actually want a man. I can still live this straight life. It's not as much a part of my identity the same way. And then I fell in love with a guy and then realized from then, and that was probably around like 23 or 22, I first fell in love with a guy. I started dating a guy at like 23 for the first time. And that's like around when I came out, around 23. And yeah, I started writing predominantly about bisexuality at the time. And there was such a dearth, like we kind of spoke about this, but a dearth of information. So I started writing bi content, and it was specifically for bisexual people. Like the few non-research articles that were out were like 10 things to never say to a bi person or 10 myths about bisexuality. But it was all content like about bi people to convince gay and straight people that we exist. It wasn't actually content for bi people about like, how do you navigate biphobia? When can you call yourself bi? What do you do if someone doesn't believe that you're bisexual? How do you come out to your family as bi? And then you start dating a woman after you come out as bi. What does that mean? All these kind of questions I was struggling with, I started writing about. And from there, it expanded to just larger queer sexuality and then male sexuality. Then from there, just like all sexualities, which is how I ended up with the column at Men's Health and a non-monogamy column at Cosmo, and how I ended up, working for Grinders, their sex and relationship experts. So I've been doing this now for like, let's see, my first article that was actually like published was like 2015. So I've been doing this now for about a little over a decade. Yeah.
There's got to be something nice about working in the field where you're just the things that you're passionate about and do every day are actually field research, right?
It's my mom said do what you love and the money will come. I don't think she meant do this and that I would be coming, but yes, both were true. But yeah, no, I did not think I was going to be a writer. I did not think I'd be talking about bisexuality or queer sexuality or any of this. It really was this kind of divergent path. I thought I was going to get a PhD in clinical psychology. I was working at Harvard Medical Center as a smoking cessation researcher and counselor. It was, and I really was going to get a PhD, and then this detour happened, and I'm so freaking happy I took this detour and became a writer and sex expert. So yeah, life works in mysterious ways here.
And I would say, at least from my observation, and I see this again with a lot of our listeners who have been married to women and know there's a mismatch in their sexuality. And I would say, and I don't know, statistically, I would imagine amongst the population of men who come out later in life, there is a fair amount of bisexuality.
Yeah.
My observation, though, is still that there is a lot of bi erasure that goes on, even amongst, or maybe even more so, in the queer male community. Like, oh, if you're saying you're bi, that's you're in denial that you're really gay.
It still exists. I think especially like, I almost feel like I had it more when, unfortunately, like before I was hooking up with a lot of guys, a lot of girls, and non-binary people too. And now it's almost like the proof is in the pudding, where it's just like, oh, you've seen me have male boyfriends. You've seen me have female boyfriends or female girlfriends, excuse me. Yeah. But like when, honestly, I'd say I've had some female boyfriends too. I got non-binary, trans-inclusive, everything.
Exactly, right.
But it's like when you're like almost new to coming out is when you get the most flack, because like, oh, you're going to change, and the more time that you have. But it's interesting because I think there are men who come out later in life, after marrying a woman, realizing they're gay, realizing they're bi, and it could be confusing. It's like, I do love this woman. And at a time, maybe we did have connected good sex, but that has changed over time, and it's no longer this. And my desires have changed, and I think that can be really confusing. Yeah, and because of that, confusing to the individual, and then other people don't know necessarily what to do with that information. But yeah, there's still a lot of bi erasure.
Yeah, they're absolutely. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, Zach, when you talk about coming out, you came out as bi, you came out as gay, or you came out to celebrate your gay side? What was your coming out?
No, I came out as bi. And originally when I came out, I kind of made this distinction that I was like bi-sexual, but hetero-romantic, meaning I could sleep, with everyone, regardless of gender, but I was only looking to date and could only love women. But then that was just internalized homophobia, internalized biphobia. And then when I realized, no, it's more than a sexual attraction I have to men, I actually could date and fall in love with men. But I always claimed the bisexual label, and I've stuck with it for all these years. Yeah.
Right. So I wanted to dive in because I think one of the really important things that you have addressed a lot and you talk quite a lot about in the book in Boyslut is the whole area of shame. And I know this is pervasive, right, amongst the queer community. We see this so much in men that come out later in life, right? We spent our lives, decades,
Yes.
denying who we were because we believe we had to live up to some kind of societal expectation. So not only denying to the outside world, denying to ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly you do realize, okay, I can't live this way anymore, but there is such deep-seated shame. How, I'd love to get your thoughts on how what can people do to, break out of that? I mean, you represent such a sex positive shame way of living.
Shame-free life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry. You said shame way of living. I was just saying shame-free.
Shame free. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, keep going. Yeah.
Shameless. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So what thoughts do you have on that? What advice would you give to somebody? Say, hey, I mean, I know it's not as easy to snap your fingers and you get rid of that, but
yeah, I mean, I had to write a whole book to figure this out. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So I definitely, but I think that speaks to the first aspect, like educate yourself. I think there's so many good books out there that will make you feel less alone. Because I feel like that's one of the ways that which shame is so pervasive and is able to proliferate is when you think that you are alone, that you are the only person going through this. So through education, reading books, you learn that you are not alone. Similarly, I think it's important to find your community. Like when you're surrounded by other people who are shameless or who don't have this sex negativity, you're less likely to have it. If you're only surrounded by people who don't get what you're going through, you say something, you say a sexual desire, you say a sexual experience, a kink that you have, and they look at you like you have a third eye and that you're crazy, you're going to feel crazy. So it really speaks to the importance of not feeling alone. And that can happen through education, that can happen through community, that can happen through going to sex positive events. We're kind of in somewhat a heyday of sex positivity. I think there's now recently been a pushback in the past 5 years, definitely. But there's still so many events and groups and people that you can meet. And I think that's really the most important thing when you feel so alone and so ashamed for your behaviors and your identity and who you are.
Wow. Yes.
Absolutely. You talk about, I love that, the idea of of finding community, and we talk
Yeah.
a lot on the podcast about the importance of community. Where do people find that community?
I mean, of course, I'm Grindr sex and relationship expert, so I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Grindr here.
Yeah.
Like Grindr really is like the global gayborhood in your pocket. It can be kind of whatever you want it to be. I think there's this idea that it's just casual sex, and that's not true. There's plenty of casual sex on there, but they're also like through tags, you can connect with other people. Let's say you're a gamer, you want to connect with other gamers, you want to connect with other sober people, you want to connect with anyone in any capacity. Grindr is a great way to just meet other gay, queer, bisexual men in your area, either for sex, for friendships, for dating, for, hey, where are you going out? Where are the good parties? What do you recommend? Just like kind of almost crowdsourcing people in your neighborhood. I think, there's so many different orgs, and it really depends on where you live, that do more like in-person type deals. And so, like, depending on sex positive organizations near me, sex positive events near me, it's like we're in this era, like we can Google and figure this stuff out. So just see what meetups are happening by you. And then there's also like a digital community. There's a lot of people on Reddit, and there's so many good subreddits about people coming out later in life, about embracing bisexuality, where if you're struggling to meet people IRL, let's say you maybe live in a small, town in the Midwest and there's just not a lot of gay and queer people, okay, at least you can go online on sites like Reddit and Instagram, even stuff like this, and just find other people that are talking about this, that are experiencing the same thing. Because there are so many different various like chats and articles and things that, will make you feel less alone, and also give you an opportunity to connect with people, even if it's not in person, but you might get these, buddies that you chat with and eventually maybe go visit.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really, really good point when you talk about Grindr and, and any of the other apps that are out there. I hear so much of people like, oh, I hate the apps. They're terrible. And my take on it is like, it's not the app. It's not the app, right? I mean, sure, you could say the good, the bad, whatever about any app. It's listen, you put a bunch of people in an online environment, and
It-
guess
it-
what? There's going to be assholes out there.
Yeah, people
Right?
really get emboldened by anonymity
Yeah.
to be jerks, and you don't have to engage with, like, if someone is giving you a bad vibe, someone not responding, someone being, you block and you move on. You
Right.
don't have to engage with it. You don't have to waste your mental energy trying to argue with them. You don't have to convince them of anything. They're just going to be some jerks on the app. And at first, it's a little bit jarring, I think, if you're not used to it and people speaking in a certain way. But after the first few times, there's so much opportunity for real, genuine, just fulfilling connections that don't let
Absolutely.
the few assholes who happen to just be quite loud. But they're not that, you know what I mean? So they seem like they're not. They're just a few loud assholes, and don't let them discourage you from using the apps.
I mean, I can,
or using Grindr,
yeah. I mean, I can share my own, my own experiences, and I've shared some of this in on the podcast here before. My boyfriend, he and I met on Grindr.
Yeah.
I've got some really, really close friends that I've made. We first met on Grindr, and
it's also the beauty of gay culture too, is the number of friends I've made where it's like, maybe we hooked up once or twice, realized, okay, we're not going to be boyfriends, maybe the sex,
Right.
for whatever the reason, we still hang out, we're still friends. And I feel like that's a unique aspect of gay culture, which is just like, yeah, you can sleep with your friends, you sleep with a dude, then become friends. And of course you can do this in elements of straight culture as well, but it's not as mainstream straight culture, I would say. That's definitely a unique aspect of gay culture. It's kind of integrating sex with friendship in a way that straight culture doesn't do the exact same way, or as well, I'd argue.
Yeah, absolutely. You
I have
were
a question. I have a question for you. So,
Sure.
Being a bisexual man, and are you embracing a gay side to yourself, or do you still just call it a bisexual side to yourself?
I mean, it kind of, we live in a world that's really almost broken up into gay and straight in a way.
Yes.
So it's like, I don't want to,
but at the same time, not wanting to label it, it's like, for our listeners who may be struggling with their sexuality, it's like you identifying that you have the same sex attraction, but then you also have an attraction to women. How are you embracing that? You're not embracing that as a gay side to you. It's more of a bisexual side.
I mean, it's a little bit semantics, but for me, like, being bisexual is being attracted to the same sex and the opposite sex, or being attracted to all genders, however you want to define it. So it's like, part of being bisexual is being gay. You know what I mean? It's almost like encompassing in this way. I couldn't be bisexual if I didn't have same sex or same gender desires, but like, I don't necessarily conceptualize it as like gay straight. I'll just say bisexual. You know what I mean? And I might be like, this is a gay desire that I have if I'm describing, I want to take anonymous loads and I come down. You know what I mean? Like that like you still describe things as gay. There'll be times, and even bisexual people will describe themselves as gay. You know what I mean? Just instead of being like, oh no, I'm actually bi. And it's just sometimes easier to do this if you're talking about gay sex or doing gay things, or like, it's sometimes making the distinction isn't necessarily necessary, but like, I don't know. I feel like bi is all encompassing. I don't necessarily see it as like my gay side and my straight side, although at times maybe I do. I don't know if that necessarily answered your question, but
Yes, it does. It does. Yes. I say this because you will meet men who will want to hook up with other men, but say, I'm not gay. They're not gay. They want to get their dick sucked by another guy, but they're not gay. So they're not admitting that they have something with another man, whether it be an attraction, a connection, something.
Okay, I see
They're
what you mean.
denying that side of it. So I'm just.
I mean, I definitely embrace that side of it. I'll be like, no, I want to do this gay shit. You know what I mean? I want to hook up with a dude that's gay. I like that. I know what you mean, and it's interesting, and one thing that you'll see kind of some arguments about in like when you can call yourself bi is when it's like, I'm bi because I am attracted to men. I'm attracted to women. I'm attracted to all genders. It's not like, and you see these guys who maybe are getting blown in a locker room bathroom, let's say, and they have a wife, whatever it is, and these guys aren't necessarily attracted to men. They're more just opportunistic and taking advantage of a sexual experience, and they just like the feeling of getting blown, and they're willing to do whoever does it. But if you're talking about bisexuality as an attraction, okay, well, these men are, it's not like they find guys hot. That's not why they want to hook up with them. They're hooking up for different reasons. And I believe, behavior is definitely a huge component. Of course, it's one of the largest components of sexual identity, but it's not a fully encompassing component. So it's like, okay, I'm hooking up with other dudes, not because I'm attracted to them, but because it feels good. I don't necessarily want to partake in gay culture. I'm not trying to go to RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm not trying to go out in Hell's Kitchen. So it's like, to what end would it's like when you label yourself as bi, you're almost telling something, or gay or any other identity, there's an element that's personal to you, like this is who I am and this is this, but you're also conveying something about you to the world. So if these guys are not looking necessarily to date a guy to actually hook up outside of any setting that is not a gym locker room, does it make sense for them to call bi? And again, this is assuming they're not lying to themselves about who they are, because I think a lot of the times they are. A lot of the time they're not willing to admit that they're actually attracted to men. They're that they actually would date men or sleep with men if there was no biphobia, no homophobia. But I also do believe they're the people that are quote unquote straight who they just want to get blood. And like, so again, there's nuance here.
You use the word opportunistic.
Yeah.
I get that. Totally understand that. Mark, if a woman offered you a blowjob, are you taking a blowjob from a woman?
What? Okay, there's an opportunistic question. So the way I would answer that is I wouldn't seek it out because it doesn't interest me. If opportunistically it presented itself and I'm horny and want to get my dick sucked, I might. I don't know.
Really? All right. Okay. This is what I want to understand.
So does that? I mean, so maybe I shouldn't be wearing the shirt that says gay. I don't know.
No, I think it's complex, and I think that's the one thing about like bisexuality, sexual fluidity, just identity over like we almost don't quite have the words to describe everything, and then we end up coming up with 50 more different identity labels. It's like, okay, well now we have too many words, but it's almost just like the English language doesn't have quite the way to describe the nuances of sexual desire and attraction.
Yeah. Well, and you can get into the semantics, you can get into the wordsmithing of it, right? Because oftentimes we say, well, you can have same-sex attraction, but that doesn't make you gay, right? Whereas, hey, I'm going out and saying, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the sexual part of it. It's about how I identify as who I am, how I see myself in the world. And I think that's where sometimes that distinction comes.
Yeah,
right?
That can come from. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, you have equal attraction to men and women. You don't lean one way or the other.
So the thing is, I'm one of the few that like tend to date roughly 50-50. But the thing is, it's so funny. It's like, at times when I'm dating and only sleeping with men, I miss sleeping with women. When I'm only sleeping with women, I miss sleeping with men. And at times I might find myself more attracted to, or just find myself sleeping with more men than women or women than men, and so it's kind of weird because, roughly maybe I'm 50-50, but at times I'm definitely not. I'm also attracted to non-binary people. Where do you include them in that if you're just doing 50-50? But I think that question can feel somewhat, it's like, it's hard to answer that question because I feel like attractions do change. And if you're dating someone at one time, it's like, especially if you're monogamous, which I'm not. I'm someone who's non-monogamous, open relationship oriented. But when you are monogamous, it's almost like, well, if I'm 90% attracted to men, but I end up falling in love with a woman, that 10% more monogamous, it's almost like that 90%. I don't want to say is moot, but then that question no longer becomes relevant the same way. Yes. So it's kind of, it's a tough question to answer.
Okay. Let's go back to Grindr for a minute, or just dating apps in general. Because a lot of our listeners coming out later in life, what is something that you would want a gay man coming out later in life to know before downloading all of these apps? What would you advise them?
Um, I was gonna say it can sometimes feel, if you're not used to it, and especially like you're maybe getting unsolicited dick pics or butt pics, like it can just feel like a lot. People I think on Grindr are often very comfortable with their sexuality. They're very open in expressing sex, and now I openly express my sexual desires and what I want. But if you're new to that and someone's saying like I want to be fisted or something, like it could just be like, whoa, do I deserve to be here? I'm receiving a gaping asshole, whatever it is. And it's like, no, you deserve to be here. There are people in the exact same situation that you are in. I always recommend for people new to Grindr or late in life, like you're coming out as gay or you're hooking up with men later in life, like I would be honest about that if you're, hooking up with new guys. You don't want to be put in a situation where someone assumes you're more experienced than you are,
Yeah.
and therefore is potentially more sexually aggressive or gets into kinky things in a way that you're not necessarily like, no, I'm new to bottoming. I want to have slow set. Like, just let them know beforehand that you are new to this. So you don't end up in kind of a gay 301 orgy. You know what I mean? Like, you got to start off slow. So yeah, I think my advice would just be like, there's going to be a lot of options. It could be a little bit overwhelming at time. Engage the way that you want to engage, and take it slow with everyone.
And I think that's a really, on the one hand, you say, yeah, that seems very obvious, right?
Yeah.
But what's going through my mind as you're talking about that is I come back to the whole idea of shame in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because I see like, guys coming out later in life, you had a lot of shame about being gay, about being bi, about being queer. You get to the point where you say, okay, this is who I am. And now you've got almost kind of counter shame, if you will, of am I going to be accepted by this community? I don't know what I want, or I'm ashamed, or I'm afraid to say I'm new to this. Am I going to be accepted? And so then you're still trying to be something that you may not be, or you're not ready to be, and you don't know where to go.
Like, I think we forget, and I understand why we forget. There's no one way to be gay, and I know that's such an obvious sentiment, but if you're surrounded by a certain type of gay man, sometimes you go out in Hell's Kitchen. That's where I live in New York. Oh no, I live in Brooklyn, but I live in New York here. And you just see a lot of these guys who are like very muscular gays. They almost look like clones of each other, same style, same fashion. And if you're like, I don't look like these men, they're all acting the same way. Do I deserve to be here? What this is, and realizing, okay, that's one type of gay club. There are different types of gay club. There are bear clubs, you know what I mean? And so if you're a hairy or a bigger guy, and not only it's a matter of aesthetic, but I feel like bears just tend to be more welcoming and inclusive, and just generally also shame-free and stuff like that. I love hanging out with bears, otters, the hairy gay community. There is gays that don't go out, and they have sober events as well. So if you're sober and you don't want to get involved, or go to a place that's a bar, they're gamer events. There's so many different ways and types of gays, but sometimes if you're just going out to bars or one type of bar, it seems like everyone is the same and you don't fit in, which speaks to finding your people, finding your community, finding your gays, your bis, your queers that accept you and embrace you. And I'm not saying that they have to be exactly like you, you know what I mean? But especially where you feel like you fit in for who you are, and you're not trying to fit this, archetype of what it means to be quote unquote gay.
Yeah. Yeah. Bear happy hour every Thursday night in Hell's Kitchen. It's always fun.
It is.
Zach, I wanted to go back to you. You were talking about, and I know you talk a lot about this in the book as well, open relationships, polyamory. Say a little bit more about that, because I think a lot of people, there can be confusion about what is an open relationship versus a polyamorous relationship. And I think also for a lot of guys coming at this later in life, they're used to one form of relationship. The kind of relationship you have is a heteronormative, monogamous relationship. And suddenly you're in the gay, bi, queer world, and it's very different in terms of relationship types.
Yeah, I think there's so many different ways to be polyamorous or non-monogamous, but let me start by defining some of these labels here, or terms, so people know what they are. So non-monogamous is kind of the larger umbrella term for anything that is not monogamous. So that includes open relationships and polyamory, among a bunch of other things. Now, a polyamorous relationship, poly means many, amory means love. It means you're open to having many loves. So people in polyamorous relationship might have two boyfriends and a girlfriend and a they friend. They might have a wife and a girlfriend, a boyfriend and a husband. It's also important to note that you can be polyamorous and not actively have a boyfriend and or like two boyfriends at the same time. Like, it's more of a mindset. So like, if you have a husband and you're like actively dating, looking for another boyfriend, you're still polyamorous. It's not the actual, like, you have to have 4 different partners at once. It's just being, I'm open to it, I'm seeking it out, I'm looking for it. And then an open relationship is when you have, sex with people who are not your primary partner, not your husband, but you're not looking for love. You're not trying to have 2 boyfriends. Right. You're not going on dates with other people. Or maybe you are. So some open relationships, you can go on dates with other people, and it can get a little bit blurry sometimes with open relationships, because it's like, oh, can I hook up with a friend? Am I only hooking up with strangers once on an app so I don't fall in love? And various people have various forms of open relationships, different types of rules, that some of which are kind of intended to stop you from falling in love with someone or stop you from having jealousy with someone else, whatever it is. But like, especially when we think of like, that heteronormative monogamy, there's kind of one way to do that conceptually. Right. There's not. There's actually, I would argue, different ways to be monogamous. Like, it's not just that. But still, there's so many different ways to be open, and you can figure out what works for you and your partner. And I know me, I've had different types of open relationships where, for example, I've dated women who they're like, hey, I would get really jealous if you hooked up with another girl, but because you're bi, I don't mind you hooking up with guys because I know I can't give you that. And I've heard that coined as gendered monogamy, but there may be other terms for it. So that's like something where, oh, that's a different type of open relationship that's also unique to me for being bi. But that's just like one example of the various types of non-monogamous relationships that you can have.
So there's a lot of perception, right? That, oh, if you're into an open relationship, then, well, you're just a slut.
Yeah.
Or it can never work. And, what the hell are you doing? So what have you seen? What makes an open relationship work?
I think, first of all, you go into an open relationship, like, I would never open up your relationship because things are not going well and you want to explore. You have to be really good at communication. You have to be on a secure ground with your partner. And you're doing this because, hey, we trust each other, we love each other, but we're looking for more excitement in our lives. We're looking to do this together. And I think that's beautiful. But like, you're opening up your relationship as a last attempt effort to save it. It never freaking works. So I will say that. I think it's being clear about like why you want this open relationship too. Like, if it's because you really don't like, some people like kind of do it because they are stuck in this relationship and they don't know how to get out of it, and they hope that this will help them. Like, they're like, that's not going to work. But hold on, I'm starting to ramble here. So remind me exactly what your question is, so I can go ahead and answer it more directly.
More about what makes an open relationship work, or not work, right?
Like, honestly, communication, being on the same page. If you struggle to communicate, like, before being open, do not do it. Being honest about your intentions. Some people don't realize that you can very much still cheat while being in an open relationship by breaking the rules of it. You have, anytime you're lying to your partner, if you're supposed to have sex with other people with a condom and then you don't, and you lie about it or omit that truth, like, yeah, that's cheating, that's lying, that's not okay. But honestly, it's cliche to say communication, but making sure you're on the same page, just so you know, because like, you're gonna get jealous. Emotions are gonna happen, and there's nothing wrong with jealous is like, are you jealous? Actually, hold on, let me frame that. So like, yeah, jealousy is going to happen. And when it does, you can't project that jealousy and be an asshole to your partner. You know what I mean? That doesn't give you a right. Like, you're allowed to experience this emotion. That doesn't give you a right to be mean or necessarily angry towards your partner. especially if you're jealous and they abided by the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they did something and you realize, oh, actually, I didn't like you hooking up with someone else, I got jealous. It's like, okay, you can talk to them. Hey, I'm jealous. I didn't like this. Moving forward, can we do this? But you can't just be an asshole. So you have to know, like how to communicate your feelings, what this jealousy is telling you. Hey, is the jealousy telling me like I'm feeling like I'm not getting my needs met? Like, is that something where it's like you're dating too many different people and not seeing me? Is it because you actually treated me poorly when you were in front of another person? Like what is going on? You really have to have that ability to analyze your feelings in this way so you can communicate it beyond just being like, I'm jealous. I'm jealous. So what do we do with this information? Like we need to know how to perceive moving forward. So there's this level of like metacognition of like analyzing what you're thinking, analyzing what you're feeling that happens with open relationships.
Because you're always evolving. So the relationship you had when you got into it, say 6 months ago, isn't necessarily the same relationship you're having today or the same feelings you're having today. So you're right. It's all about communication, keeping the communication going.
In one thing, I think in monogamy, a lot of the times people are like, okay, this is our relationship. This is the dynamic. And they don't bring anything up because they assume there's one way to go about this. But with open relationships, it's like important to know, hey, at times you might want to close back up. At times you might want to change the dynamic. At times things that were working for you are no longer working for you. So it is this ongoing dialogue. It's very rarely like we're open, we set these ground rules, and now we are open for the next 50 years with the same ground rules. Like over time, things do change, and allowing yourself, your partner, and your relationship to evolve and grow and to make those changes with them.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's a really important point, right? It's the fluidity, right, that you've got to have to make it work. Nothing ever stays the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Zach, I have a question. I'll cut this part out if you don't want to answer this, but I guess for myself, I want to be more specific with you and how relationships work with you. Can we ask you questions like that? Can we ask you about you? Okay. So, my question with being bisexual, and you talk about being in relationships, if you're bisexual, you're non-monogamous, other than a friendship, what kind of relationship are you having with somebody other than maybe like you're on a lease with somebody? What is the relationship if it's non-monogamous and it's bisexual? It seems like where are the rules in that? Are there rules in that, or you're just day by day kind of just?
No, I mean, I don't see how necessarily the bisexuality would play a role in that. I think if you're non-monogamous and gay, you're going to run into the same issues or potential problems with it. But for me, what I have done, so I've been everything from like poly, where I lived with my boyfriend's wife, and my boyfriend's wife's girlfriend. I was recently out as bi, and actually my first relationship with a man was in this poly setting, and I'll be honest, it was a lot. It was a lot to emotion, just a lot to navigate. I think I was 23, 24. A lot of feelings, but I grew and learned a lot about myself in this time period.
And there's structure in that relationship, because you're talking about multiple people at the same time.
There's structures. At that point, you're navigating, who's sleeping in whose bed, when are you doing date night, stuff like that. There's a lot more logistic. The more partners you have, just the more logistical it becomes. Right. So I feel like
still commitment. There's commitment of some sort, even though you're not monogamous with that person. There's still a form of commitment.
So yeah, monogamy and commitment are not synonymous. You know what I mean? You can be absolutely committed to one person. You love this person. They are your entire world, and you're deeply committed to them, but you're still sleeping with other people. And you can go about this in a healthy way as long as you're open. I think this idea that the only form of commitment means that you're shutting yourself sexually to other people, no. And we also know people that are monogamous who are very much not committed to your partners. And I don't even mean in terms of cheating sexually, but just in terms of the emotional commitment, whether they are treating them with respect, whether they're taking out the trash when they say they're going to. There's so many different elements of commitment. But just monogamy generally, it does not equate commitment.
Okay. All right.
And I think that's
Yeah,
really, important too when you start talking about, an open, again, let's talk about an open relationship
Sure.
versus a polyamorous relationship, because I
Yeah.
think those are different things, right? I mean, they can be a polyamorous relationship can be a flavor of an open relationship. But you could have an open relationship where it's not, correct me if I'm wrong here, it's not polyamorous. It's, I love this person. They are my committed romantic partner, but I have a bigger sexual appetite than my partner. And therefore, I can, it's separating the physical sexual act from a romantic
Well, that's
commitment to
exactly
somebody, right?
what open is. That's exactly
Yeah,
what
right,
open
right.
is, where you just have that love of the one person, that romantic love, and
Yeah.
then you're sexually open with other people. Um, yeah, yeah, and
all right.
for me
And
personally,
I ask these questions only because I am a monogamous person, so
yeah,
I'm understanding at the same time is why I'm asking
no,
these
it's good that
questions.
you're asking, and I had a thing where I was dating an ex, and we started off by being polyamorous because that was what it was. She actually had a girlfriend at the time. At the time, I didn't have like a serious, I had more just like casual partners, maybe friends I sleep with. I don't know if you want to call them lovers. I don't want to, like, we almost don't have the word in between like casual partner and like romantic partner, but it's like friends who I care about, who I do love, but for whatever reason, we're not dating and romantic, but it kind of blurs that line a little bit. And what ended up happening with her was maybe a year in, we just realized we actually don't want to be poly. We want to be open. It was kind of just a little bit. I always describe polyamory sometimes in open relationships like the juice has to be worth the squeeze, because putting in this additional communication and this additional work and navigating jealousy and all the emotions that arise, like, are you in a place where you want to do this? Because it is a lot of work.
Yeah.
Not that monogamous relationships aren't a lot of work too, but it's a different type of work. And we just realized, hey, we were getting jealous. We were spending 5-6 nights a week together. So with what time, like what the one day we have off, we're gonna go on a date with, it just wasn't worth it. And so we moved into a place of just being in an open relationship. And kind of the way I said it too, I was like, if you end up naturally falling in love with someone, let me know. We'll figure out a way to integrate them into our lives. But we weren't on, apps trying to go on dates. We weren't actively trying to meet someone and fall in love and have another partner the way that someone who polyamorous is. But I just wanted to be open to, hey, the world throws you curveballs. I don't want you to be in the situation where you happen to fall in love with someone you work with, let's say, and then you're like, well, we're doing this after that. Like, we would, I told her, I'm like, I would be heartbroken if you fell in love with someone else, but we would also figure it out and figure out a way to make it work. But there's no reason to like lie about that. Yeah.
Right.
What is the biggest myth about bisexual men?
Oh my God. I have a whole chapter in my book where I debunk myths. And it's like, because I think there are so many. Hold on. Let's see. I have my book. Hold on. I'm holding it up. Hold it
There
up.
you
I have
go.
it right next to
Definitely
me.
promote that.
Yes.
Boyslut, a memoir manifesto. Find it anywhere books are sold, baby. But Boyslut is one word, because we learned we would have been like essentially like marked as spam or dinged on Amazon and Google if you just did slut separately. So for like SEO purposes, we are this. But I think the biggest misconception I think still about like male bisexuality is that we're just secretly gay. I think that's like still the main one that comes out, and there are a bunch of other smaller ones too. And I know where this comes from. Like, the thing is, when I was in college, the guys I knew that came out as bi came out as gay shortly after. So if I'm looking at my sample size, I probably knew 5 or 6 dudes in college. I went to a very queer friendly college who identify as bi before coming out as gay, because they still almost wanted to have one foot left in the straight world. They wanted to, like, if they're telling their dads, let's say, they think it's a little bit more palatable. It's like, look, I could still get married and have kids to a woman, but I also like this. And it's like, for many gay men, it is part of their journey to identify as bi and then gay. And I get that. And you see a lot of that. For me, no, I was bi and I still am bi, and I'm pretty damn sure I'm always going to be bi. Like, that's not an issue, but you just didn't see enough of it. So when gay men use it as a stepping stone. It could be a little myopic, but it's this idea that like, oh, because I used it as a stepping stone, or I only knew these men that used it as a stepping stone, therefore every bi guy must be using it as a stepping stone. It's like, well, hold on. That's a huge leap to make, that because you and two other guys, your sample size is 3, there are 8 billion people in the world, that therefore every, it's like, no, that's not how this works. So it's almost a little bit of a self-centered approach, just because, oh, this is what I know, and therefore I assume everyone is exactly like me, when that's just not the case.
Yeah. And it also comes back to, sexuality is a continuum, right? Is there really, I mean, maybe there are some people that are totally on one side or the other, but it's a continuum.
If we lived in a world without any homophobia, so therefore no biphobia, no this, like, I'd be so interested in knowing what the numbers would be. Yeah. Because I've had so many debates about this. Like, would it be a third gay, a third bi, a third straight?
I think it would be a lot more bi and gay. I think it really would be.
80% bi, if everyone was just down, and then 10%. Like, I really have no idea what these numbers would be, but it's such an interesting hypothetical, because you have these. Well, obviously, you have like ancient Greece, where you talk about like, having sex with men was definitely. I don't want to get into all the nuances of it, but like there were so many elements of that, and it was part of stature, it was part of structuring and the actual society itself. You see that in certain cultures up to like the 1800s, where like it was a norm for men to be sleeping with other men, whatever it was. And then the homophobia comes out and breaks through and all this stuff and erases that. But like, we do have some aspects, from the hundreds of years ago, when they didn't have the same shame or stigma. And when that was the case, you see a lot more gay and bisexual shit happening. Absolutely.
Yep. I don't know. I mean, this is just my perception, but I feel like, since I've come out, I've become convinced that everybody is at least bi, if not gay.
I think one cool thing about coming, when I came out as bi, I was like the first that I knew to identify as bi as like a stable identity. And, I'd be at bars or whatever. I bartended a little bit when I first started writing to get my, get some money while I was doing it. And I would, come out that I'm bi, talking to people. And I was shocked by how often they'd be like, oh, I'm bi too. Or I've never used that label, but I hook up with dudes. And then they would pour their soul out to me. And it just shows like they had no one else that they, sorry, my cat's meowing at me if she wants more attention. But it just shows that they had like no one else to talk to about this. And the moment I'm a complete stranger, and yes, I'm a bartender, whatever, and there's that trope of being able to, share what's going on with your bartender. But like, that was one of the cool things about being bi or queer or gay, whatever it is, which like the moment you start talking about it, you'll be surprised by how many people are also bi, are also gay, are also queer, whatever it is. They just didn't have necessarily the courage to bring it up. But the moment that you do, and you've put now they know you are a safe person to talk to about this. I can be open, I can be honest, and you're that safe person. They will share their guts with you, and then you'll realize, hey, you're not as alone as maybe you thought you were.
Yeah, and similar to that, what I'd say, my experience, Brian, you may find this too, like guys coming out later in life, like the more you start talking to people, it doesn't cease to amaze me how many guys I'll talk to that have, I've been at bars in the city. I was at the Monster a few weeks ago, and I'm sitting there just by myself having a drink. I start talking to this other guy. We start telling our story. It's like exact same story as mine. Came out later in life, married, had kids. It's like, and there's just so many people like that. It's amazing how once you start to open up, like it's whether it's bi, gay, there's just so much of it out there, and people feeling like they can't live their lives because to me, it just comes back to that homophobia, that shame that is so ingrained in people.
It's so, and that's like, go for it.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'll ask my question after you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just go for it. I was gonna riff off that, but I had already said it, so go for it.
All right. Well, my question is being fluid replacing being bi? Or is there a distinction between the two at this point? Because I hear a lot of people using the term fluid now, and for my own knowledge,
I wish there was like some concrete definitions to some of these labels, and and people use it differently, which is why there is, I think, some confusion. But I think fluid was, it often manifests, very similar in like to bisexuality. I think a lot of people are afraid of the word bisexual. Like, I think there's so much stigma, like that is a part of it. So because of that, there were a lot of these like labels that came out that kind of mean bisexual, but they use fluid or pansexual or ambisexual or polysexual. I've heard all of these terms, and yes, they do have, some of them have distinct meanings, but like fluid can be more, at times I'm more attracted to men, at times I'm more attracted to women. If they see bisexual as being 50-50, I don't. There's a great, actually, I'll do this. There's a definition of bisexual that I use in my book that is kind of all encompassing of all this. So it's not this. So it's encompassing of fluid and pan and all this other stuff too. But bisexual. So yeah, at the beginning of my book, I have a glossary for all these terms. It's kind of a fun way for people to engage with this. But there are many definitions of bisexuality that make understanding the sexual identity a little confusing. From what I've gathered, a lot of the confusion comes from the fact that bisexual used to refer to attractions to biological sex and not gender. Some folks then changed the definition to indicate an attraction to genders in an attempt to be more inclusive. However, gender is far more nuanced than biological sex, and language cannot fully capture the complexities of gender and sexuality. This leads to inconsistencies and confusion when attempting to define bisexuality, and then in parentheses, and pansexuality. That said, a favorite definition of mine comes from bisexual activist Robin Oakes. She says, I call myself bisexual because then I can acknowledge that I have in myself the potential to be attracted romantically and or sexually to people of more than one gender, not necessarily at the same time, not necessarily in the same way, and not necessarily to the same degree. Oakes differentiates between romantic and sexual attraction, notes that you don't have to be equally attracted to men and women or multiple genders, and acknowledges the fluidity of bisexuality. Who you find yourself predominantly attracted to right now may change later. Since she focuses on potential attraction, Oakes' definition also includes bi people who are monogamous or virgins or have never kissed someone of the same or different gender or sex. Most important, her definition doesn't perpetuate a gender binary. Some folks think that the bi and bisexuality means that you're only attracted to cisgender men and cisgender women, but that's incorrect. Bi people are attracted to multiple genders, and most bi people I've met are indeed attracted to all genders, as well as folks who operate outside the gender binary. While I love Oakes' definition of bisexuality, I'll admit it is a mouthful. So I like to simplify it to a person attracted to multiple or all genders. It doesn't have the nuance of Oakes' definition, as attraction is so broad, but I think it gets the point across. So I know a lot of that like kind of got into like delved deep into it, but just kind of shows like, yeah, it doesn't have to be at the same time. At times this might change. It doesn't mean that you have to have, they're monogamous people who are bi, but they're like, no, I love my partner. I don't want to do this, but it's important for me to still acknowledge this aspect of my identity. So I like bisexuality to be really, really inclusive. And I think it can include, labels like fluid and stuff like that.
Do you find, Zach, when we talk about bi erasure or, the lack of acceptance, is it more accepted, if you will, that a woman could be bi more so than a man?
It's like, it's so funny where it's just like, if you're a woman who's bi, they assume you're straight. If you're a man who's bi, they assume you're gay. It's like, no matter what, it's assumed that you must like men. like God forbid, that's not the answer.
There we go.
And like, I think both come with a different set of challenges. Men, I think, are less likely to be believed, potentially, but then women are more likely to be fetishized, in this way where like a straight dude finds it so hot. And so, or, like, like they're just different. They're different challenges that I think come with both.
Yeah.
As a bi man, do you get rejected by gay men when they find out that you're bisexual?
Sometimes I have. I mean, usually more so they're dismissive. It's not necessarily rejected as much like, oh, I just don't believe you, but you're hot, so I'll still hook up with you. And I'm like, oh, that's like really douchey for you to say, and therefore assume that. And then there are the gay men who like really like bi dudes, like honestly fetishizing us in a way that's a little bit problematic. Where I feel like they're like, oh, it makes you straighter that you hook up with woman and therefore you're more masculine. I'm attracted to that masculinity, or they try to like steal you away from dating a woman because they have that kink or fetish or whatever it is. But I experience much more rejection from straight women than I do from gay men. And since I've come out as bi, because again, they're afraid that I'm secretly gay. Both assume I'm secretly gay. That's less of an issue if you're a gay man. If you're starting a life with a woman, that's more of an issue. But since I've come out as bi, any woman I have dated seriously, to the point I've called, my girlfriend or primary partner, whatever word you want to use, excuse me, they have been bi as well. And that's just in part because we get each other. There's like less jealousy. We get what's going on, but also because, straight women often do not want to date me.
Yeah. Wow. So I've got a final question for you.
Yeah.
Let's say a 55-year-old man, married father, comes to you and says, hey, Zach, I'm finally beginning to explore who I am. I'm excited. I'm scared. I'm ashamed. I'm overwhelmed. I'm worried about making mistakes. What is the one thing that you'd most want him to know?
The one thing, even though you are 55, there's still no rush. I think there's this idea that you might want to be making up for lost time, or you have to do everything very quickly because, I've been denying myself this for so long. And, how much longer do I have to be it's like you can be sexual well into old age. You have plenty of time. So you don't need to stress and worry about doing everything at once. Don't have this idea of making up for lost time. You figuring yourself out is a journey. You know what I mean? I feel like sometimes you want to have everything figured out, know exactly who you are. And like, I think we're always growing and evolving. So like, just try to allow for a little bit of nuance, for a little bit of gray space, for a little bit of insecurity, and just do what feels right on the timeline that feels right for you.
That is excellent advice. Because I would say, I think there's a lot of us that definitely feel that making up for lost time, right? Or as we've talked about, you're having your our gay adolescence.
Yeah. And you're gonna make mistakes because you're like, and that's everyone makes mistakes. Of course, you might do something and realize, I didn't really like that. I don't want to do that moving. So then you don't. That's okay. But try to say yes where you can. Obviously, feel uncomfortable and safe. Don't do something. But like, it's okay. This is what life is. It's a messy, beautiful thing.
I love that. Yeah. So, any closing comments that you have?
No, I was going to say, so I have a book called Boyslut, a Memoir Manifesto. Of course, definitely check that out. I also have a Substack called Boyslut as well, which is either great branding or slightly confusing. And that actually posts a lot of like nonfiction and fiction erotica. So it's different than my usual types of writing. It's fun, horny, but like still literary stuff too. And I do the like thought pieces on gay movies and culture and stuff like that as well. And you can also follow me on Instagram, Zachary Zane __ at the end. And of course, get on Grindr, the local gayborhood in your pocket. And I think that's just such a good way to meet people. Truly.
Great. Well, Zach, we thank you for joining us. This has been
thank you for having me. This
really
a lot of fun.
Great conversation. We really appreciate it.
Well, I know with Riverside, I'm not supposed to exit out, right?
No, you can, because we're not going to hit should we stop recording and then just hit the record button again, Mark?
We can pick up
all right,
what we need to pick up.
So we'll stop this.